I knew the new guy was trouble the second he swaggered into the Monday morning staff meeting like he'd just been promoted from mall cop to dictator of the server room. He didn't even sit down before throwing out his first decree: "We own your weekends." Just like that, 4 words, smug as hell, as if my free time was some corporate asset he could trade on the stock exchange. The rest of the team chuckled nervously, but my smile didn't reach my eyes. I'd been in this game long enough to know exactly what he meant: unpaid on-call duty, endless late-night pings, holidays wrecked by server crashes, and of course, the one relic tying me to all of it, the battered old company pager they never once put on my paycheck. He kept talking about team spirit and operational excellence, which was rich coming from a guy who probably thought Raid was a bug spray. I nodded, taking notes I'd never look at again. While my brain replayed the last decade of weekends I'd given to this place, birthdays, barbecues, even my sister's wedding, all interrupted by that stupid pager's shrill beep. And now here was Captain Clipboard telling me it wasn't just expected, it was his right. I can't lie, that was the moment a little seed planted itself in the back of my mind. Not rage, not even spite, just the cold understanding that if they wanted to keep chaining me to this outdated brick of plastic, maybe one day I'd let the chain slip. The rest of the meeting was a blur of acronyms and buzzwords. He announced a streamlining initiative for our alert system, meaning, of course, not improving it, but cutting any budget that might make our lives easier. When I suggested we migrate from the pager-based alerts to a modern, redundant platform, he waved it off like I'd proposed buying a gold-plated coffee maker. "Legacy works fine," he said, leaning back in his chair like he'd just ended the debate. Legacy, his polite way of saying cheap and fragile. I kept my mouth shut, but I saved every single one of his dismissive emails. I had a whole folder of them: my proposals for critical infrastructure updates, his one-line rejections. If the system ever went down at the wrong moment, be no need for finger pointing. His name would already be on the smoking gun. Still, I played the good soldier. I trained the junior techs, patched the systems, and kept the duct tape solutions running because it was my reputation on the line, not his. But in the quiet moments, my eyes would drift to the pager clipped to my belt, scuffed edges, faded display, the faint smell of burnt plastic from the time it overheated during a summer outage. And I'd think, "You're mine." Not theirs, they'd never paid for it, never logged it as company property. It was just assigned to me, and no one had ever bothered to track it in inventory. So when he threw another jab later that week: "If you can't handle weekends, maybe you're in the wrong line of work," I didn't even flinch. I just smiled, that same calm, quiet smile that hides the fact you're already halfway out the door. Because now I wasn't just annoyed, I was prepared. Every arrogant word out of his mouth was another brick in the wall I was building between myself and this job. The pager became my silent ally. I kept it charged, kept it on me, but I also started imagining what might happen if, purely by accident of course, it didn't work. Or maybe if it just happened to be somewhere it couldn't be heard. In a drawer, under a couch cushion. In another zip code. And because the alert system was still wired entirely through it, any major outage would funnel straight to me first, me, the person they'd made perfectly clear was nothing but a resource to burn. That thought stayed with me long after the meeting ended. I walked back to my desk past the humming servers and flickering monitors, thinking about how fragile it all really was. One cheap pager, one dead battery, one unapproved update, that was all it would take to send the whole thing into chaos. And the best part, I wouldn't even have to lift a finger. It didn't take long for my proposals to start piling up in his inbox, unread or ignored. The first one I sent was polite: bullet points, cost estimates, risk analysis. I even dumbed it down so that someone whose last tech experience was probably setting up a home router could understand the stakes. Within 15 minutes, I got his reply: "Not a priority. Legacy works fine." That was it. No questions, no follow-up. Just a digital shrug. Fine, I thought. Maybe he just needs a little more data. The second proposal was thorough: screenshots of recent near misses, vendor quotes showing the upgrade would actually save money in the long run. His reply: "Too expensive. We'll revisit next fiscal year." I knew that was code for never. Around here, next fiscal year is the graveyard where ideas go to die. The third time I sent him an upgrade request, I made it impossible to ignore the risks. I included a case study from another company that had suffered a multi-day outage because they relied on a single-point alert system, just like ours. They lost millions, their CTO got fired, and the story made industry news. His reply landed 3 minutes later: "Fear-mongering, we're not them." That one went straight into my evidence folder. It wasn't just arrogance anymore, it was negligence in bold font. He wasn't rejecting my proposals because he had a better plan. He was rejecting them because acknowledging the problem would mean taking responsibility for fixing it. And responsibility wasn't something this man seemed familiar with. I started noticing a pattern. Anytime someone raised a legitimate concern, whether it was me about infrastructure or another department about budget overruns, he dodged the issue by mocking the messenger. "Oh, you're being dramatic. Don't sweat the small stuff. That's a problem for future us." He thought it was witty leadership. I thought it was exhibit A for the inevitable implosion, so I got methodical. Every single rejection email went into that folder. I backed it up on a personal drive. I tagged them by date, proposal number, and the exact language he used to shoot them down. If the day ever came when someone asked, "Why did this system fail?" the answer wouldn't just be a hunch, it would be a neat, chronological list with his name all over it. The tension between us simmered quietly. He probably thought I'd given up trying to push my agenda. I let him think that. I played the role of the compliant senior analyst, nodded in meetings, kept my voice neutral. But behind the calm exterior, my frustration was crystallizing into something sharper. I realized I didn't need to convince him anymore. He'd already done the work for me. Every not a priority, every fear-mongering was a breadcrumb leading straight back to his desk. And the pager, still humming away on my belt, still wired into the only lifeline between the system and the people who could fix it. Every time it buzzed, I thought about how fragile his whole house of cards really was. All it would take was the wrong outage at the wrong time, and the story would write itself. The breaking point wasn't some shouting match or public scene, it was quieter than that, the kind of moment that looks small to everyone else but lodges in your chest like a splinter. It was a Thursday afternoon, end of the month. I'd been in the server room for hours, half frozen under the vents, rerouting traffic around a hardware bottleneck he swore didn't exist. My hair smelled like ozone and dust, my hands cramped from working in the rack's cramped shadows. I came out to grab a coffee and found him leaning against my desk, holding a printout of one of my upgrade proposals like it was a bad joke someone had handed him. "This is why you'll never be management," he said, loud enough for two nearby coworkers to hear. "You get stuck in the weeds, always fixing things that aren't broken. Vision, not patchwork, that's what we need." Then he dropped the paper in my trash can like it was trash all along. Something inside me went still. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself. I just took the coffee I'd been reaching for, walked back to my chair, and nodded at whatever smug thing he said next. But my mind was already elsewhere, calculating notice periods, thinking about how good it would feel to walk out of here without looking back. By the time I got home that night, the decision was already made. My resignation letter was 2 sentences long. I scheduled a meeting with HR for the next morning, smiled through the formality of it all. By noon, I was back at my desk boxing up the small pieces of my life from the last decade. I handed over my badge, my laptop, and my ID card. HR ticked each item off their checklist, barely looking at me. No one mentioned the pager. It wasn't on any list, it never had been. That ugly gray brick stayed in my bag, silent. It was mine now, for all intents and purposes, though still wired like an artery into the company's heartbeat. No speeches, no slammed doors. I said my polite goodbyes, shook a few hands, and walked out into the crisp afternoon air feeling lighter than I had in years. There was no giddy rush, no cinematic swell of music, just a clean, deliberate cut from a place that had long stopped valuing the work that kept it alive. That night, I set the pager on my kitchen counter. Its display was dim, the backlight struggling, a little blinking signal icon fading in and out like a heartbeat running low on oxygen. I made dinner, poured myself a glass of wine, and every so often my eyes would drift to it. That weak blink was more than a signal, it was a reminder. I didn't plan anything that night. I didn't have to. The system was still pointing all critical alerts to that pager, and no one had rerouted a thing. If a storm came, and storms always come, it would hit the weakest point in the chain. And that weak point was now sitting quietly in my kitchen, miles away from the only person who could stop the bleeding. The first Saturday morning after I left, I woke up to sunlight instead of the shrill, panic-inducing beep of the pager. No frantic calls, no urgent tickets that were just someone forgetting their password, just quiet. I stayed in bed an extra hour, staring at the ceiling, letting the stillness sink in. It felt almost decadent, like I was cheating the system just by sleeping. My days slowed down in the best way. Coffee was no longer chugged in front of a dashboard of system metrics. It was savored on the balcony, watching the neighborhood wake up. I could go grocery shopping in the middle of the afternoon without worrying about a call pulling me away. I even went to a friend's backyard barbecue and stayed until the fire pit burned out. No sorry, gotta go excuses. No sideways looks at my phone. Of course, the pager sat on the counter the whole time, silent but not forgotten. I didn't check it, didn't charge it, didn't so much as touch it. It was a ghost in my kitchen, its faint signal icon still fluttering when I passed by. I'd catch myself glancing at it while cooking dinner or folding laundry, the same way you glance at the sky when the air pressure changes, knowing a storm might be building somewhere, even if you can't see it yet. Then the texts started coming in from my old coworkers. Not about outages, just misery. Hour 3 of his team synergy presentation. Kill me. He made us take a loyalty pledge before lunch. He just compared our department to a Navy SEAL unit. I'm not joking. The man had apparently doubled down on micromanagement now that I was gone, holding endless meetings, making everyone recite slogans, sending out motivational emails that read like a parody of a leadership blog. I'd shake my head and smile, my relief sharpened by the knowledge that I wasn't trapped in that circus anymore. One Tuesday evening, my friend in the networking team sent me a photo, the new on-call rotation schedule. My name, of course, was gone. At the bottom in bold was a note from him. Holiday coverage plan is locked in. Expect flawless operations this year. Holiday weekend. 3 days of people checking out early, taking trips, ignoring their work phones. I could almost see him strutting around the office, bragging about how the legacy alert system was bulletproof, how they didn't need expensive upgrades or alarmist protocols. I poured myself another cup of coffee and leaned on the counter, staring at the pager's dim little screen. Still blinking, still connected. The thing about flawless operations is that they only look flawless, right up until they don't. And when that moment comes, it's never during a Tuesday morning with everyone in the office. It's on a Friday night when no one's paying attention. It happened exactly when it always happens, late on a Friday night, the first night of the long weekend. I just poured myself a second glass of wine and was halfway through a bad but satisfying action movie when the weather outside shifted. Not a storm, just that strange, heavy stillness that comes before something breaks. Somewhere, in the fluorescent hum of the company's data center, a critical process stumbled. Maybe it was a failing disk array, maybe a database replication glitch. Whatever it was, the monitoring system did what it had been programmed to do years ago, funnel the emergency alert through the legacy paging network. And from there, straight to one device, the pager sitting in my kitchen drawer, its battery long dead, tucked between a spare set of keys and a pile of receipts I'd been meaning to throw away. The first alert probably hit at 10:47 p.m. The system would have retried every 2 minutes, faithfully pinging a device that couldn't respond. Each attempt logged as delivered because the pager network was just dumb enough to believe that if it sent the packet, someone must have received it. On the company's end, the logs would show that an alert went out, and then nothing. No acknowledgement, no escalation, just a void. I didn't see any of this, of course. I didn't need to. I knew the chain by heart, and I knew exactly how it would fail. Instead, I sat there on my couch, sipping wine, watching a car chase on screen, my only conscious thought being whether I wanted popcorn. The pager's silence wasn't a surprise, it was the expected outcome. And knowing what that silence meant for them filled me with a kind of calm, almost meditative satisfaction. By the time their skeleton holiday staff realized something was wrong, the damage would already be multiplying. Without that first page alert, the initial fault wouldn't get triaged. Dependent services would keep running until they hit the same fault, and then fail in turn. What started as a manageable hiccup would snowball into something sprawling and ugly, the kind of outage that doesn't just affect internal systems, it spills over into customer-facing services. When they went looking for the source of the failure, they'd find the trail ending neatly at my old pager ID. They might even try to ping it directly, only to get the same dead-end result. In theory, they could have reprogrammed the alert routing months ago. In practice, that would have required approving the very infrastructure update my ex-manager had shot down in writing, multiple times. So I let the movie run. I let the wine warm in my glass. Somewhere across town, war room would be forming, people dragging themselves in from family dinners, staring at screens that showed them nothing useful. Every second they spent hunting ghosts was another second the system bled, and all I had to do to keep it going was exactly what I was already doing, nothing at all. By Saturday afternoon, the cracks weren't just in their walls, they were spilling into the street for everyone to see. The kind of outage you can hide from internal reports is one thing, but when your customer-facing systems start blinking out in broad daylight, there's nowhere left to hide. I didn't need insider dashboards to know it was happening. The first sign was a headline scrolling across my phone's newsfeed, "Major Service Disruption at Company Name." The article was light on details, just a canned statement from their PR team about unforeseen technical issues and working diligently to resolve. That's corporate speak for we have no idea what's broken or how long it'll take. Then came the social media storm. Tweets from angry customers tagging the company, each one more brutal than the last, 3 hours down and counting. What am I paying for? Lost a $50K deal today because your service failed mid-demo. Moving my business elsewhere. No reliability, no trust. By early evening, I started hearing from the people still stuck inside. First, a text from Brian in networking. Been here since 2 a.m. No end in sight. Then from Mia in ops. 72 hours straight in the war room if this keeps up. Her follow-up an hour later was just a photo, rows of empty energy drink cans lined up on a desk, like some sad little monument to burnout. It wasn't that I wanted them to suffer. The people in the trenches weren't the ones who'd ignored every warning, every proposal. They were just the ones left to clean up the mess with duct tape and caffeine. But I also knew stepping in now, calling someone, offering help would only protect the man who'd created this disaster in the first place. And I wasn't in the business of throwing him lifelines. So I watched from a comfortable distance, the way you watch a storm you're not standing in. Detached, calm, almost curious about how far it would spread. It's a strange kind of freedom, knowing you hold a missing piece of the puzzle and choosing not to move it into place. Not out of cruelty, just out of principle. By nightfall, more headlines were popping up, each more pointed than the last. Analysts were speculating about financial losses. Industry forums were buzzing with threads about their catastrophic vulnerability and lack of redundancy. It was all the stuff I'd warned about, now playing out in real time for anyone with an internet connection. Meanwhile, the pager in my drawer was as quiet as ever. No new messages, no change to its faint, lifeless screen. It was almost poetic, their critical alert lifeline reduced to a dead battery in the dark, while the rest of the company burned overtime trying to make sense of a problem they'd built themselves. And me, I made dinner, watched another movie, slept through the night without a single interruption. Whatever was going on in that war room, it wasn't my fight anymore. By Monday night, the lights finally flickered back on in their corner of the digital world. Whatever jury-rigged patch they'd slapped together held just long enough to bring systems online again. The public-facing services sputtered back into existence, but not before the damage calcified into something permanent. Contracts dissolved mid-outage, SLA penalties triggered automatically, and clients who'd been loyal for years publicly declaring they were moving on. I didn't need an official statement to know the numbers were bad. The scale of the outage alone was enough to tell me they'd bled millions in both revenue and credibility. For big accounts, downtime isn't just an inconvenience, it's a breach of trust. And breaches like that don't heal with a simple apology. By Tuesday morning, I was sipping coffee at my kitchen counter when I got a text from Mia. CEO just ordered a full post-mortem. All hands, you'd love this. I smiled into my mug. Of course he had. The bigger the disaster, the more the higher-ups want a narrative that explains it neatly, preferably one that ends with a single neck to wring. What they'd find wasn't going to be subtle. Somewhere in that maze of logs and timelines, they'd stumble across the routing configuration for the alert system. They'd see exactly where every critical notification had gone during those crucial first hours. And right next to that, they'd see the paper trail. I upgrade proposals, time-stamped and detailed, each one explicitly warning about the danger of a single-point alert failure. And then the piece de resistance, his replies. Short, dismissive, documented, not a priority, too expensive, fear-mongering. A greatest hits album of arrogance, all preserved in their own email archive. The thing about a postmortem is that it doesn't care about charm or politics. It's a forensic exercise. It's about cause and effect, decision and consequence. And decisions leave footprints. I imagine them pulling those emails into the report, the investigation team's faces tightening as they realized how easy it would have been to prevent the entire outage. No heroics required, just a few approvals, a budget line item, and maybe the humility to listen to someone who actually understood the systems. I wasn't giddy, exactly. This wasn't the thrill of winning a game, it was the slow, inevitable satisfaction of watching a story reach the ending you knew it was always headed toward. There was no doubt in my mind what the final report would say, and no doubt whose name would be anchored to the conclusion. Somewhere in the company's polished glass conference room, they were probably still piecing it together, hunting for the moment where everything went wrong. I could have told them the exact day, down to the minute. It was the same moment he'd laughed in that first meeting and told me they owned my weekends. The pager stayed in its drawer, dark and silent, as if it had already played its part and was content to rest. I left it there, untouched, letting them connect the dots at their own pace. After all, the truth didn't need me to push it. It was already wired into their system. The report landed on the boardroom table like a dropped anvil. Not the glossy, bullet-pointed kind executives like to skim. This was the raw, black and white kind with log extracts, email timestamps, and diagrams so detailed they might as well have been autopsy photos. The room was quiet except for the occasional rustle of paper and the dull hum of the ceiling vents. Halfway down page 14, nestled between escalation timelines and service impact charts, was the sentence that mattered. Primary contributing factor, lack of approved infrastructure updates. And right there in parenthesis, the rejection date followed by his name. No team phrasing, no shared accountability, just him. It wasn't an accusation. It didn't have to be. The report's language was clinical, almost detached. But in a setting like that, detachment makes the impact worse. It strips away the politics, the excuses, the narrative spin. All that's left is the fact. He was the person who received multiple documented warnings, and he was the one who shut them down. The weight of that line was enough to shift the air in the room. You could almost hear the mental math as the board members connected the numbers in the financial loss column to the sentence in front of them. Millions gone. Clients gone. Reputation gone. All because a decision that would have cost less than a single annual bonus never got made. From what I heard later, the CEO didn't launch into a tirade or ask for explanations. He didn't need to. He just closed the report, rested his hands on it, and fixed his gaze on the man across the table. No blinking, no softening. Just that slow, deliberate stillness of someone who already knows the verdict but hasn't said it out loud yet. Around them, the rest of the board shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few avoided eye contact with him. Others glanced down at their copies, as if maybe rereading the sentence would make it change. It didn't. For me, hearing about it secondhand, there was no rush of adrenaline, no gleeful cackle. Just a sharper, more distilled kind of satisfaction, the kind that comes when justice isn't dressed up in fireworks, but handed down plainly, in a single undeniable fact. That line in the report was the exact moment the stakes hit their peak. Everything before had been damage control, trying to patch a ship already taking on water. Now they were face to face with the person who had poked the hole in the hull and then laughed off the suggestion to fix it. The pager stayed in its drawer that day, still and silent, like a relic from another life. But I knew without looking that somewhere across town, in that glass-walled room, its ghost was in the air, every beep it never made echoing in the pause between the CEO's stare and whatever came next. The silence in that boardroom was the kind you could feel in your teeth, thick, oppressive, with every breath measured. Chairs stopped creaking. Pens stopped moving. Even the air vents seemed to hush. Then the CEO, without breaking his stare, flipped back to page 14, placed a single finger on the damning sentence, and read it out loud. Primary contributing factor. Lack of approved infrastructure updates, he said, his tone as flat as the table beneath the report. And then, for the benefit of anyone who'd somehow missed it, he read the name attached. The paper rustled as he set it down, the sound sharp in the stillness. No one dared to fill the pause, not with a cough, not with a shuffle, not with a platitude about lessons learned. The CEO leaned back slightly, hands folded in front of him, and delivered the verdict like a closing door. You're done here, no raised voice, no theatrics, just the kind of finality that doesn't leave space for rebuttal. It wasn't an invitation to resign. It was a sentence already carried out. The manager's face drained of color. For once, he didn't have a smirk or a quip or a deflection. He gathered his papers without looking up, slid them into his bag with mechanical precision, and stood. His chair rolled back a few inches, its wheels squeaking in the dead quiet. No one offered a handshake. No one met his eyes. He walked to the door like a man moving through water, slow and deliberate, as if speed might make it real faster. Then he was gone, no goodbye, no parting shot, just the faint sound of the latch clicking shut behind him. Somewhere across town, I was sitting at my kitchen table, the late afternoon light spilling across the counter. The pager was still in its drawer, a lifeless gray brick surrounded by forgotten keys and loose batteries. I didn't need to see it to know it had done its work. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there with a quiet, settled feeling, the kind that comes when the scales finally balance themselves without you having to push. He had claimed my weekends once, as though they were his property. Now, all he had was empty ones stretching out in front of him, unbroken and unpaid. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.